Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is a heavy way of rounding out the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, Janine, I think it has to be said.
Yeah.
A remarkably emotionally charged movie.
Yes. Trigger warning to anyone as well who has any issues with kind of body horror or animal cruelty type things.
Not
Um,
me. Well, I say not me as though I'm into it. I like body horror. I don't
yes.
obviously like being cruel to
To
animals
an
and animal
y- y-
experimentation, but that is
yes.
an element of this movie, a
That is it,
major
and
element
it's
of this
been
movie.
teased throughout the franchise. Like, we know that this is kind of generally what happened to Rocket. We've seen the kind of markings and plugs and things in his body, so we know that it's leading to this. James Gunn has always talked about Rocket being kind of the secret protagonist of this trilogy the whole time, and I mean the trailers lead to us to believe that there's going to be a lot of a Rocket story, which deals with a lot of that. So while yes, there is some animal cruelty elements throughout the film, think I don't know how to tell this story of Rocket without showing that.
Well, no,
Um,
that's actually what the
and
movie's about, so you need
exactly,
to
so
deal with it.
you need to deal with that, and I think because our in movie characters are having the same reaction that we're having to what happened to him, um, also helps, making that more meaningful in terms of you know sympathizing with Rocket and really
Yeah,
uh uplifting him after kind of seeing what he's been through. So
yeah.
yeah,
I
definitely
mean,
difficult scenes in there to watch, but very understandable for where this character goes and his backstory and really understanding him more, um, for sure.
definitely. This is entirely Rocket's movie, really. I mean, you've just said there how James Gunn said in the past that the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, Rocket is the secret protagonist. I would I would have to look closer at the first two movies to recognize that, but I wouldn't have to look at all close in this movie to
Yes.
recognize
And
that he
no,
is
I
the lead character of this movie. This movie is Rocket's story. Not only is it Rocket's origin story in these extended flashback sequences of him being experimented on, gaining these other weird amalgamation of animal machine friends that he
yeah.
has. And, they're all in this cage together, just being essentially tortured for the purpose of evolutionary perfection and all this kind of stuff, which is a fascinating concept to deal with. I think the villain concept in this movie is very,
It's
very
so well
interesting.
done. Yeah.
Very, very body horror, like you've said, because it's genetic experimentation and genetic perfection, playing God, all this kind of very interesting sci-fi stuff that always interests me, and I think that this movie tells those stories, deals with those
Yeah.
concepts, and really quite horribly and
Yeah.
impressively horribly,
And
like,
the
to the
fact
point
that
where there's horror elements really to the movie. It's quite genuinely terrifying.
yes, so definitely not, I think, for little kids to be watching this movie.
No.
um, for sure.
The high evolutionary is going to terrify them.
Oh yeah, he's really kind of scary, especially at the end when we see like his true face and see what Rocket actually did to him.
He looks
But
like Two-Face from
yes,
Batman.
and in terms of um kind of that whole body horror aspect and the animal cruelty aspect, even Nebula, them kind of watching the video of Rocket surgery and Nebula saying that's worse than what Thanos did to me.
And we know what Thanos
And
did
we
to
know what
her. We've
Thanos did to
seen
her.
that.
Yes, and she mentions it all the time about how he ripped her apart and replaced each part of her body with mechanical parts every time she failed or messed up, as a punishment. And so for her to say that what is happening to Rocket is worse than whatever happened to her, and we know how bad that was, just really speaks to the pain that Rocket is dealing with. And I actually did a rewatch before going into this movie, so you definitely, it's easy to, if you're focusing on Rocket, you can see what James Gunn meant, and the fact that he takes so much offense to the term raccoon, and because it's always said to him in a negative context. It's not, you know,
Yeah.
being a raccoon in and of itself. It's because of this negative connotation. It's always used as an insult, as a way to insult him and demean him, and that's why
He,
it upsets him. He never takes it lightly when somebody kind of calls him some little thing or misnames him. He's always kind of upset by it and angered by it or
yeah.
made to feel sad about it. And so it was kind of interesting watching those first two movies and really taking the time to focus on him throughout that.
But it's because, and we learned that much more in this movie, he doesn't know what he is,
Yeah.
really. He's just Rocket. He just sees
Yeah.
himself as, I'm Rocket. I once had friends that one of which had a really stupid name. Two of
Leave
which had a really
leaves leave
stupid
Teefs
names.
and Floor alone, okay? Leave
I will
Teefs and
not
Floor
leave
alone.
Teefs and Floor alone. What sort of a names? Teefs.
Don't misspeak about them.
Stupid walrus. Um,
It's
I w-
so mean, especially knowing what happens to Teefs, like, the way you're
I know, to
talking
be
about
fair,
him.
knowing what
Just
happened there is pretty.
yeah,
Shouldn't
don't
be mean to Teefs, really, should I? It's pretty
strike
nasty,
that,
really.
reverse it.
Yeah, scratch it, reverse it, wind it back, Willy Wonka. Um, no, but he is, he just views himself as Rocket. It's only in this movie he actually learns that raccoon's just who he is. He
That's
is
like that's
actually
yeah, ironic,
that's his
and
species. He is
And
a
I mean,
raccoon, and he
in the
embraces
comic
that.
yes, by the end, because in the comics, he is Rocket Raccoon, like, that's Rocket Raccoon, so I love by the end, he's like, "My name is Rocket Raccoon," because, um, uh, he will only refers to our villain, his creator only refers to him by his number. He
Yeah,
doesn't they gave themselves, I think there was a lot of emphasis on the fact that they gave themselves those names. They named themselves because they were only known as these, unimportant numbers. And the fact that they found happiness with each other and played together and had this dream of getting to see the sky, something so simple, and um, just how it
this is
ends for all of them is so heartbreaking. Um,
well, it's
yeah,
beyond heartbreak. It's
yeah,
genuine. It's devastating.
yeah,
It is absolutely devastating. The movie plays it so horribly. What happens to Rocket's friends? What happens to Rocket himself?
yeah,
Absolutely. But how he has to then deal with just the execution,
yeah,
really, of his friends, because they matter nothing to the high evolutionary.
yeah,
They are experimentational numbers. That is all they are to him, which is why I find him a particularly grimly
and
terrifying
even
villain.
when yes, and when Rocket is screaming in agony for the loss of his friends, and the High Evolutionary is just mocking him and mocking his
Yeah.
screams, like, so sick and twisted, and the fact that he also mocks him before that. He has this machine where he's putting these animals in there and trying to make them these human animal hybrids, and it's not working because the animals are getting an overproduction of some hormone that's making them violent. And Rocket is able to, because of the brain he's been given by the High Evolutionary, is able to figure out the problem with the machine and what's making them so violent. And so, Rocket thinks he's going to get to go to this new world that the High Evolutionaries created. Um, And when he is told that he's not going to get to go there, the High Evolutionary is just very kind of mocking. You could figure out how to solve this problem with these animals, but you couldn't figure out that you're too ugly to go to my new world? Like,
Yeah,
and just kinda
it's
scoffs at
really
him.
it is
Yes.
brutal.
So
The
you
entire backstory
yeah.
of the entire backstory element of this movie is just brutally devastating,
Yeah.
but you come to appreciate Rocky, I think, so much more as a character because yes, okay, half of the movie is spent in Rocky's past, but the other part of the movie is for the vast majority of the time, Rocky's on his deathbed, essentially.
Yes. And
The
he
rest of the Guardians
are
are
fighting with their lives to save him,
yeah,
which just shows how much he means to them. And so
yeah,
I think that
exactly.
that's enough to speak for Rocket in the present, them fighting for him, despite what it's gonna cost them.
Exactly,
Um,
because he only I mean, this is a full spoiler review of Guardians of the Galaxy
oh, yeah.
Volume 2. We said that at the very beginning. He obviously comes back to aid in the final kind of
Yes.
battle and escape. They end up helping him, revive him from his near-death experience at the hands of our Adam Warlock
Yeah.
in this movie. Um, but the entire movie is learning who Rocket is for one half of it, and then intercutting that with learning just how far his friends are willing to go to save him and just what he means to everybody
Yes.
else
And
in the
that's even
Guardians.
enough, and that is enough to even get, um, this version of Gamora to find some understanding and,
Yeah,
really appreciate them for who they are and understand why Peter is, so hung up on, the relationship he had with her. Because at this point, he, is having a hard time seeing this version of her and her not remembering and still being kind of this cruel, hateful person because of all of the anger she's had built up from her father. Um, and she just can't have any sympathy or understanding for him being in love with this other version of her. But when she's kind of stuck on the ship and she's looking through his things, and then she's just seeing how much this team loves Rocket and what they're willing to do and seeing how strong this family is, I think it's enough to have her kind of respect them and like them and see a bit of that future version of herself and see, well, maybe I can see why I had a life and a relationship with these people.
yeah,
So I think their love for Rocket and them going, as far as whatever they need to go to save him was so powerful enough to get this hateful version of Gamora to a level of understanding with seeing that, future version of herself and really seeing that, I get it now. I get why I was a part of this family. After seeing
yeah.
her be just so harsh and cruel to them, like the whole bulk of the movie. So
I mean, every one of the Guardians is really well dealt with and well balanced in this movie. I think from a story standpoint and from a send off standpoint, because that is what it is. We end
yeah,
this movie with a parting of the Guardians of the Galaxy,
as we
or
know them, yeah.
as we know them, a new team formed with elements of the previous Guardians, but you know, Peter's no longer there at the end of this movie. Mantis has gone off. Drax and Nebula are staying on nowhere.
Yeah, they found a new purpose for themselves, and then Rocket gets
Gamora's gone back to the
to the
Ravagers.
Ravagers, yeah, and then, yeah, Rocket is now the leader of this new iteration of the Guardians, as if you watch the films, like, him constantly kind of stepping up in a command aspect in those films as well,
Yeah,
so, and Peter telling him, "You've always kind of been the leader, you've always been in charge," and all of that, and yeah, definitely think it's worth going back and watching Rocket paying attention to him in those first 2 movies. And then this one kind of really just seals the deal on this really being his story. So yeah, I was completely shocked just kind of seeing all the emotion coming out of this movie, hearing Dave Batista and Zoe Saldana talk so much about how this is their last movie and they're done and all of that. Um, Really thought that we were gonna get a death in this movie, and we
I
came
mean,
damn near close a couple of times, but,
we did.
like,
Does
I was
Gamora need to die again? I mean, I'm perfectly
no.
happy to.
Well, no, like, I didn't expect her to die, but just kind of this finality talk from these actors in general, just being out there, and just kind of all those early reviews talking about, um the sadness and the emotion and this being the last iteration of these guardians and knowing all of that going into this movie, I was 100% banking on somebody dying. And so the
Right,
fact that
really.
everyone lived and they're just kind of moving on, I think made me happy. I didn't want to see anybody die. I don't think you always need that to, you know, have stakes or whatever. When it
You
does
don't, and
happen,
you also don't always need that to be an intensely emotional movie,
yeah.
because this was an intensely
And
emotional
so the
movie
fact that people were saying that because of
yeah,
everything else that happens.
because of a particular character's
Yeah.
journey, and not even just the devastation and hardship of Rocket's journey, but the fact that really, by the end, all the Guardians almost self-realize, don't they? They realize actually what they themselves, in themselves, want from life,
Yeah.
really. You know, new old Gamora, sure, she has her family with the Ravagers, she goes back to the Ravagers. Drax, they say it at the end of this movie, has always really just wanted to be a dad again.
Yes, like, he talks about his daughter so much in these movies and the fact that, like, yeah, Nebula makes him come to that realization, like, "You were never meant to be a destroyer, you were meant to be a dad. So I need
And
your help
Nebula
here."
needs some
And
fun.
yes, and she needs a purpose, she is good at helping people, and so the fact that she wants to build this community and help people, and even Kraglin had his whole little kind of moment as well,
He did.
really trying to live up to Yondu and, as kind of his most loyal guy and really trying to um, live up to that legacy and respect that legacy of Yondu. So I like that he got a kind of little something too with trying to learn the arrow and help out and he got a little moment of seeing him and hearing his words kind of guide him. And so I
Yes.
think that was really sweet as well. Um and
It
yeah, I
naturally
liked
eventually succeeding for Kraglin as well.
yeah, yeah. And I liked that, Peter at least got a little bit of closure and at least Gamora recognizing how she could have fallen in love with him. You know,
Yeah, and
in seeing I bet we had a lot of fun, and he's like, "Yeah, yeah, you have no idea." So I liked that there was a recognition in her that she was like, "Okay, this makes sense."
yeah, and
Um,
that
so
sparks
he yes,
Peter
so at
into
least that's enough for
wanting.
him to go home and move and he can move forward now.
Yeah, it's more than enough for him. That sparks him into wanting to actually find out about his own past that
Yes,
he
and
doesn't really know about. His family that he left behind,
yes,
or
and the fact that
was
he
taken away from.
yes.
Sure,
And, like, this ridiculous idea that, obviously a child has about what's considered old, because it's like, when I watched things like Full House and things like that when I'm a little kid, the grown-ups on that show felt incredibly old, only to learn that they were,
yes,
like, the age that I am now when they were playing these parents and stuff on these shows. It's crazy, so you really have no concept of what old is. So the fact that he's over here, "My grandpa's probably, like, a 90, 100 years old and probably and people die at 50, on Earth. And because he left when he was a little kid, so he has no concept of like human aging, and
no,
he still has that childlike way of thinking that grown-ups who are maybe in their 30s are hundreds and of years old. Um, so the fact that he just kind of writes it off as that, I think is just a really funny thing that speaks to Peter not knowing that, like, even seeing him try to drive and you realize, oh yeah, he wouldn't know how to
yeah,
drive a car because
yeah,
he left when he was a little kid. So I loved things like that really informing Peter and reminding us that he left Earth at so young and he left his home, and his weird interpretation of what he thought his grandpa did. But his grandpa actually, like, you see his grandpa actually put that gift from his mother in his bag for him, and he's just trying to protect him when he just has him step out of the room when everything's going on. Um, it was all from a protective place. So the fact that Peter like remembers it so wrong like that. So I really loved that scene of him reuniting, and like he doesn't even have to say who he is, and his grandpa just already knows that that's Peter.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a really sweet moment, between the 2 of them, so I like that we're gonna see him on Earth and kind of understand, like, what Earth looks like after all this time away, and,
Yeah, it's
um
gonna be very interesting because that is our
yeah,
very end credit scene, isn't it? It's Peter and his granddad just kinda sat there eating cereal, and
yes, and
we
we do get
end
a kind of
with
the legendary
well, we end
Star-Lord
with
will
this.
return, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So
Um,
we will
so it's very
presumably be getting
interesting.
him out back, yes.
Very interesting.
But yeah, I loved the character moments, even just at the beginning to see how close they are. And Nebula and Mantis, like Mantis being able to call her out, like Nebula still, she obviously loves these people, but she's still pushing them away. She still has a wall up. And I like Mantis kind of calling her out on that and like defending Drax and saying, he makes us laugh and he loves us. So leave him alone for being stupid. Like that's just who he
I
is, you know.
yeah, I remember really kind of not loving Mantis in volume 2 when we first met her. But
Yeah.
ever since then, in each new
Thing we see her.
depiction
Yeah.
of
Hmm.
Mantis, each new movie or special or whatever it may be that has Mantis, I've come to enjoy her more and more
Yeah.
as a character, and she really nails this entire movie.
Yes.
She's wonderful in this movie. Again, she goes through her own self realization. I've never been able to do just what I want, she
Yeah.
says.
Even being with
I
you
was
guys,
always,
nobody listens
yeah,
to me really. I'm just doing what I'm told. Yeah.
yeah. So it's nice that she, at the very end of the
Has that
movie,
has that
goes
self-realization
off,
and
has that self realization, goes off to do her own thing. Whether we see Mantis again, who knows?
yeah, and she
Whether we
goes off
don't
with
see
those
her
big
again for years and
monsters.
years and
Yes,
years,
and the
who
sweetness of
knows?
Drax wanting to go with her to protect her, and she's like, "No, I can protect myself, like, I'm okay." And him not wanting to leave her, especially kind of watching too and seeing kind of how, like,
They
terrible he
hated
was to
each
her,
other.
calling her ugly and all kinds of stuff, and now the fact that he's just, like, it's really hard for him to say goodbye to her, which
Yeah,
I
but
kind of loved in their kind of
we
dynamic
got
together.
that. We got that considerably in the holiday special.
Yes, and learning
Was
also
the
that she is
friendship
Peter's
between them two?
sister. Mhm,
Yeah,
and the fact that we learned that she's Peter's half sister. Um,
technically, ego.
yeah,
You know, who,
yes.
who hasn't ego fathered? You
Right?
know, he
Yeah.
could be everybody's brother, Peter Quill, really, couldn't he? But that's beside the point. Um, Mantis, I just think was wonderful in this movie. I think it's a great and almost perfect ending of their
Yeah.
story because they realize who they are. All of them, every single, even Groot.
Yes.
I mean, even Groot, really. Groot never does too much, does he? He does a lot of the heavy lifting in battle and things like that, but he never does too much in terms of the humanity, but always comes out with a nice big family line at the end of the movie because he's Vin Diesel and he has to come out with something
With
like "We
family.
are one."
Yes. So, but
Um,
I like that interpretation because, the whole time this new Gamora is like, what is he saying? Like, I know who you are, very much like when Peter first met Groot. And to the point where now all of them understand the different nuances to I am Groot and that they mean different things and they can hear what he's saying through the I am Groots. And by the end, Gamora's like looking off, like waiting, and um we hear Groot come up behind her and say, I am Groot. And she's like, oh yeah, no, I'll be right there. Just let them know. And she like realizes she's understanding what he's saying. because she's opened herself up to, you know, getting to
The
know them
family.
and yes, the family. Yes. So I love that. Like she surprises herself when she realizes she's actually understanding that I am Groot. It sounds like something different. So when he does say, I love you guys, I'd like to think that it's us finally after 3 films understanding I am Groot language. And, he is saying I am Groot, but we are hearing what he really is saying. And
I like
that's kind
that.
of how I like to interpret him saying something different. And yeah, so
I very much like that thought. I really do.
yeah, yeah,
And I would like that to be officially the case. Not that it has to be recognized as officially the case, for it to be the case for you, the
yes,
individual.
yes. So yeah, I'd
I
like to
really
think that that's what
appreciate
he
that.
was trying to do. Was I think that's really special for us,
And I like that.
watching this family for all this time.
Yeah.
Also, I don't think we really talked much about Adam Warlock yet.
Not at all,
I
no,
had
actually.
heard
Mr. Eyebrows himself, Will
yes.
Poulter.
I had heard that, if you are a fan of the comic book version of him, you probably won't like how he's depicted, but in this film, it works. So I get that because I don't know Adam. While I don't know much about Adam Warlock in the comics, I know him to not really be this kind of like idiot baby who doesn't really understand
Jeez,
anything.
exactly what
And
he was. He
mommy,
was an idiot.
mommy Aisha, like help me, help me. Um, so, yeah, I can understand if you were kind of like a hardcore comics person, you might not like that, but I think it kind of worked in that essence, especially learning that the Sovereign were a race that was created by the High Evolutionary, and he calls them kind of beautiful but dumb. So they are kind of, and they
Yeah.
are shown to be kind of egotistical and dumb, and just kind of thinking they're high and mighty and that's all they're focused on. So they're already kind of a dumb race anyway of people. So the
Adam
fact that
Warlock
like
seems particularly
yeah.
stupid for that particular even that
Yes,
group of
and so the
people though,
fact that,
really.
we do see him kind of sympathize for this animal that he's like orphaned now. I think that already is just kind of a hint to open him up to showing him as kind of an emotional being. So that when he does kind of make that turn, it doesn't feel out of nowhere. It makes sense because he, was kind of just following orders and doing what he was told and doing what Mummy told him. And so I think they worked enough kind of sympathy in there with him, feeling things for other characters and that so when he did kind of make that turn to want to be a part of the team and be a good person, it didn't feel out of nowhere. So I mean, I liked his depiction.
No.
I thought he was some great comic relief in there. I think he looked great, and ultimately, kind of his turnaround by the end made sense and felt fun. So
Well,
I liked
ultimately, he
it.
saved Peter's life
Yeah,
at the very end in a very obvious,
Adam.
creation of Adam moment.
Yeah, yes,
I
and
mean,
he also
he even does the little hand
finger thing.
pointy, flicky
Yes,
motion of the painting. It's
yes,
so blatantly obvious that it's almost
yes.
vomit inducing, but okay, go for it. Why
Yes,
not?
yeah, and he ultimately becomes part of the new Rocket's New Guardians team, so which I believe
Groot,
he
by
was.
the way, in this Rocket's new Guardians team is absolutely enormous. Like,
Yeah, which is like I think there's versions of him called King Groot or something else, I can't
how
remember.
large is
So
Groot?
yes, so this is based off comic versions of Groot where he is like a very huge version of himself. Like how it looks, how it's animated is very much to kind of this bigger version of Groot in comic books. So it's related to something. It's not just a random
Okay.
like let's
He's
make
not
him
just all of a
huge.
sudden shot up in
Yeah,
size.
no, it's definitely related to a version of Groot that grows that big from
Okay,
comics. I'm led
I
to
see.
learn from my research, my breakdown
I see.
research. Um, but yeah, I mean, some great emotional beats. I think the comedy was peppered in there decently.
Yeah, but
Our villain,
not over, not overdone, so we didn't mainly focus on the genuine,
yes,
heartfelt horribleness of this entire story,
yeah,
because that is what it wanted to be. And I said this last week when we were talking about the initial reactions of this movie. MCU movies need to be grim. for them to be critically well liked.
Yeah,
This was a very grim movie, and it
definitely.
continues to be critically well liked, and now very well liked by the vast majority of people, the general public going to see it as well. And it is a bleak affair at times, this thing. It
Yeah.
is unusual when you go and watch the other two Guardians movies that I suppose the start of oh, well, I suppose there's elements in Guardians 1 and 2 that are miserable, Peter getting kidnapped after his mum's death
Mother
and all
just
this.
passed away, yeah.
Them finding out in 2 that it was Ego who gave her cancer and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Not nice things to figure out, but ultimately the two of them
Losing
are
Yondu.
mainly comedic movies. The
Yeah.
Yondu death, they're mainly comedic movies. This is not mainly a comedic movie.
No, that's not the focus. They focus on the difficult aspects,
This
and
is
then comedy
this
is
is a
secondary.
sci-fi movie. This is a
Yeah.
sci-fi evolution body horror movie.
Yeah.
And it's about taking that kind of mentality down. It's about depicting that mentality as unabashedly evil.
Yeah.
Um, as it should be, because it's what
Yes,
every
and I
body
like
horror movie ever's about.
yes, and I like that Rocket's kind of line to him at the end of, "You're not trying to make things better, you just don't like things the way they are."
Yeah.
You just can't accept things for the way they are, and so I love that kind of last call out that he gives
So
him.
let's take your mask off and
Yes, and
show
also
everybody
just a
what I do
funny
to you.
just a kind of funny nod to the comedy of this movie and the fact that, like, you know, everyone's like, it's a trap," and Peter's like, "No, it's a face off. It's a face off. It's a
Yeah,
face off." And then we
yeah.
do actually get
A
face
face coming
off.
off. Yes, that's a good point. Uh,
Yes.
don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of humorous parts in there. There's still plenty of comedy in there. It's just not the main focus, which I really did appreciate from this. I certainly think it's one of the stronger,
Yeah.
more recent MCU movies,
Y
definitely.
yes, like, I don't think I felt like this since No Way Home, like, this excitement, this emotion, obviously, I felt that from Wakanda Forever, but it was like that movie
It's
was
a
its
different
own
situation.
yes, that was its own kind of special like, I felt like I was attending a funeral for T'Challa,
Yes.
a funeral for Chadwick Boseman with that movie, and
It
so it's
had
hard to kind of things
outside the universe
yeah,
implications,
it had
Wakanda
real
Forever.
world
It's
things
its own
that
thing.
played yeah, it had real world elements playing into, what that movie was meant to be and what it was about. So,
This one's
um,
still entirely fictional.
yes, the stakes of it felt very kind of ingrained in things that really happened. Whereas this one, in terms of just the MCU and the stakes of what the MCU and the excitement of what's going to happen to these characters and seeing kind of the harsh moments from characters that you really have grown to love. I have not felt that since kind of No Way Home.
And I think that's
Um,
fair. I think
so
that's fair.
I was happy to kind of feel that MCU excitement again because I really have not gotten that from what we've been given so far. That same excitement that I felt from Endgame because I even rewatched Endgame and like I was just feeling so many awesome things about that, like, just how perfect that culmination was of, like, this universe and all of the callbacks just peppered in there just creatively and in great moments, and, uh, just the attention to detail of that movie and, like, the loss that we suffered and the joys that we felt and the moments that happened, um and we got a lot of that in No Way Home. So to kind of feel that again, we got some great character moments and character insights and amazing epic fight scenes and cool slow-mo walks and
Yeah.
great needle drops that played well. And like James Gunn is very much like an Edgar Wright in terms of the needle drops are not just like Suicide Squad just there just to be there.
No, they mean
They
something. They
they
do.
mean something. They're chosen for specific scenes. He plays those songs on set in those scenes to get the characters in that motivation. There's purpose behind every song choice and every song's placement in the movie. They're not just there for a cool moment. They're
Yeah.
there for purpose. And so the needle drops were a lot of fun. And, like I said, the slow-mo walks, like even that moment when Peter saves Gamora and they kind of look at each other and smile, and you kind of just moments like that that make you feel something and show kind of an evolution in a character. And I will say I thought, like, after kind of Gamora was looking through Peter's bag and like seeing Rocket and um kind of trying to protect him on the ship and stuff like that, I thought we were really going to see her kind of switch up in terms of how she was behaving, and that she was maybe going to try to get some of the neighborhood people when they're in that on the Earth too. She was gonna
Yeah,
try
the
to she was gonna
the
try to get save
what's
some
it
of them
called?
and get them on
Counter-Earth?
Counter Earth, yeah. I thought she was going to try to save some of them and, like, get them on the ship or something. So I was expecting something like that to be kind of the start of her turn, of kind of, respecting what these guardians do and not wanting to hurt people, 'cause, she gets called out for that a lot. So I thought that, like, that would have been something that they would have done, like, once, they saw that, the High Evolutionary was blowing up the planet, that she was gonna try to save some of those people in
Yeah.
that suburb and get them on the ship. But obviously, we get that kind of in a later scene with, all of the kind of experiments on the High Evolutionary ship instead.
I mean, that it's something that takes that you think is, the experimentation aspect of this movie and the actual genuine evil of the High Evolutionary is something that, you know, we think has hit its limit with Rocket's story. But then Rocket is revived.
Yeah.
Rocket is okay again. You get this real kind of heavy, teary-eyed relief from everybody, as well as everybody
Yes.
watching the movie
Yeah.
in the cinema as well. But then it gets even worse when they go back onto his ship and there's all these children about.
Yeah.
What's all this? Where's all this been? We've not even seen this. It gets doubly worse, trebly worse
Yes, and then there's even
because
more animals again that he's still doing these tests and experiments and all these things too.
yeah,
And Rocket, I love him despite everything we've seen, him go through with this High Evolutionary. The fact that he's like, I'm done running, I'm done, I'm going to save all these
oh, he
animals, and the fact that
completely stands up to him.
yes, and I love that he's a brave enough to go back after everything, and he's just done running away from all of that. And then again, just with talking about great fight sequences and great moments in this movie. That whole sequence where everyone kind of gets a moment and they're just taking out guys left and right, and there's these great
Yeah,
little team up moments and this very fluid
great
shot
hallway
of them.
fight.
Yes, it's so good. It's so good. And I see a lot of people touting this as kind of their favorite fight sequence in an MCU movie. And it's definitely up there. Like, I thought it was
I
amazing.
could see
I
that
could see that.
as a
Yeah, for
pure
sure.
singular fight sequence. I
Yeah.
could see that. I don't see
So
anything wrong with saying that.
yeah, yeah. So I think I love that all the characters get really great moments. We see evolutions in relationships over these past two films for obviously for characters like Mantis, and then three films for everyone else. And you really feel their family dynamic. You really feel the difficulty in saying goodbye, but the love and respect for each other and understanding why people need to do what they need to do, and
Yeah,
the support in letting people you love go because this is what they need to do for their journey, people finding their purpose. All of that speaks to a great way to close out this trilogy, to close out the journeys of these characters. And I think it was fitting. Like, I'm so glad we didn't lose anybody, but we still hit all
even
those
though I do
emotional.
think Drax should have died.
Well, he needs to be a dad. Like, I
He
liked
does need
that.
to be a dad,
I
which is
like
a
that.
reasonable other way of finishing
Uh,
Drax's story.
yeah, yes.
It is.
Um,
But
so
Dave Bautista was going on and going on like he died.
Yes, he was. He was definitely the way he was talking, like, made me feel like he was gonna die. But I'm glad we didn't lose anybody. I'm glad everyone just found their purpose somewhere else and that everyone was able to support each other's kind of purpose and going.
Yeah.
Um, Gamora's never going to be that Gamora, but I like that she came to an understanding with how she could have become that Gamora, and that was able to give kind of Peter that closure. The moment with his grandfather, I absolutely loved him going home and without any words spoken, like he knew who he was. And Yeah, just loved all the character moments, the relationship moments, and the emotional beats of it. Uh, Getting to know Rocket even in such a very difficult way. I think we needed that to understand him, especially after kind of seeing his reactions to what people say to him in the first 2 movies, you know, it makes so much more sense why those things are so hurtful and triggering for him once you kind of see what happens to him in this film. So, I
Yeah.
think we needed to see it while it was difficult. But yeah, I think the comedy worked in where it needed to, and, the focus was the character moments. Um, Even the action, I think, came second to the character things, I think,
Oh,
um, and
absolutely it did.
and was
Absolutely it did.
really well done when it needed to kind of come in there. So we got enough action that fit in perfectly. We got our needle drops that fit in and worked in perfectly. We had our character moments that were the core of this story, and we got our comedy that worked in where it needed to work in. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this movie. I think this was a great MCU trilogy. I kind of maybe have to do a reevaluation because I think Captain America was always my go-to favorite trilogy of the MCU, but I don't know. I really in watching these movies back to back, like Guardians is a great uh, evolution of characters, really investing us in characters that nobody really knew about or really cared about even, and to have such an emotional hit to everyone who's seen it with characters that are not as widely known as everyone else we've gotten in the MCU just speaks to James Gunn's writing and these actors' performances and the story of these movies. So,
You have concluded this review stunningly well, Janine.
oh, I'm
I can
sorry.
say nothing
just
else
just
even
just
more
tell
than
me
one
I'm
thing.
rambling. Just tell me I'm rambling.
No,
I'm sorry.
I cannot possibly say anything else because I echo a great deal of those sentiments that you put in there, although ranking trilogies and all that kind of stuff does come somewhat difficult to me.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Um, just one little thing I will say though is I really like the musical evolution actually of
Mhm.
these movies, given the fact that Guardians of the Galaxy 1 was full of 70s songs, 2 was full of 80s songs, and this, in the end, ended up with a song from, like, the 2000s before
Yeah.
going right back to "Come and Get Your Love" from the beginning
Yes, from
of
that first needle
Guardians
drop from
1.
the first film, and then we even open it with a '90s song with "Creep," and,
Yeah, that's what I
so
mean.
yeah,
It's a real fluid decades
yeah,
of
evolution, and I'm
music,
sure that
which I
was
really do
wholly
like.
purposeful
Oh, of
from
course it was,
James
of
Gunn's
course
end.
it was.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
And Drax dancing, Drax finally dancing because
Drax actually dancing, yeah.
he has his whole mentality about there are people who dance and people who don't, and, um, the fact that he does, like, is a very special thing as well, I think. Nebula too.
Definitely. I mean, Nebula dancing, I think, is more impressive than Drax dancing,
Yeah,
really. Drax is a bit of a weirdo, he's kind of stupid and funny. Nebula's just generally miserable.
yeah.
Every right to be, but
Oh, of
to
course,
actually
but
see Nebula have fun is a big deal.
yeah,
Is a big deal. But
yes.
yes, there we are. Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 3. That is our full